Now, there will be spoilers for the last arc of My Hero Academia, so you have been warned. In My Hero Academia, quirks are more than just superpowers. They are a reflection of one's spirit, dreams, and the challenges that they face. Among these incredible abilities, some stand out for their unique capacity to interact with other quirks. These quirks often define destinies, turn the tides of battle, and secretly shape the fabric of hero society. Today, we dive into what I believe are the top 14 quirks that can manipulate other quirks. Before the list, there are two honorable mentions that did not make it, but I felt the need to give them some reverence. The first honorable mention, though technically not a quirk, the Quirk Destroying Bullet, aka the Deleter Rounds. This modified drug is based on Ares' Rewind quirk, specifically tailored to the state of quirklessness that the original ability can push a person's body to. With just one shot of this bullet, a normal person in the MAH universe, if lucky to leave with their lives, will find themselves without their quirk. The reason why it's only a mention, as stated earlier, it's merely a support item and not a quirk. With a mere response of his voice, Hitoshi Shinso's brainwashing quirk can gain nigh control over a target or multiple targets' mind and motor functions, making them practically do anything the user wants while under their control, and as of recent, make others speak. While it does hinder someone from using their quirk, the reason why it is only a mention on this list is that it seemingly lacks the ability to cause those under the influence to use their quirks against their will. Now on to the list itself. To start off this list is a power that is used only once in the series, but has shown to be useful in an emergency situation. The Stolen Quirk, Forced Quirk Activation. If a target is conscious or not, this power causes them to use their quirk against their will. We can speculate that it requires a form of physical contact to trigger, as All For One was seen using this power in conjunction with the quirk Rivet Stab to activate Kurogiri's Warp Gate quirk. Initially called an Unformed Dud, the power of quirk bestowal of Yoriichi Shigaraki is a very particular and couldn't really be called a meta ability itself, with its only ability being transferring itself, the very quirk factor, to another. And that's it. There's nothing else to it, at least on the surface. This is most likely a result of his twin brother taking more nutrients during their gestation period as babies. This quirk is different yet minutely synonymous to the power of All For One, as it has the ability to accumulate the quirks of those it has been transferred to, potentially giving the next current user access to other quirks. Though we only saw such potential in Izuku Midoriya and not Yoriichi, which for me raises a question. Had the youngest Shigaraki twin not been born weaker, would his body been able to handle One For All, or would this quirk had been just another All For One? Let me know your thoughts. Made fun of in his adolescence for having practically a weak quirk, Shota Aizawa's Erasure became one of the most pivotal abilities for the heroes in the My Hero Academia universe. By merely gazing upon a target, the user's eyes glow bright red, and anyone within the line of sight will have their quirk deactivated, unable to use them as long as the user has their eyes on them. It worked with single targets and multiple targets as long as they are within a noticeable sight range. However, as unique and essential a power like this is, it lacks any real offensive capabilities, only nullification of another's power. Though in a world where over 80% of the human population having a quirk, this ability truly comes in clutch. I debated putting this quirk on here, but let me know what you think by the end. The sludge villain from the very beginning of the series threatened both Izuku and Bakugo with his ability to invade someone's body and take over their corpse. This morbid mutant quirk hasn't been seen fully in the series, outside of his controlling the slime of his body. The villain claims once he takes over a target's body, he'll even have the access to their quirk. We'll never see this in the series as the sludge villain has always been stopped just short of fully taking over someone, but it's here mainly due to concept. Also, what name would you give this ability? I would go for Sludge Stealer. While many quirks often derive themselves from the quirks of their parents through simple genetics, the most unique tend to never look or even be adjacent to their predecessors, and Ares' Rewind quirk is one of them, allowing the user to turn back the biological clock of any target through physical touch is a miraculous ability. On a precise scale, this quirk can heal wounds going back weeks or even years if the horn on her head has accumulated enough energy, and can even restore the quirk of a recently quirkless individual. On a macro scale, this ability could give someone a form of immortality by rewinding them back to a state of youth, as seen with All for One in the final arc. Though in an uncontrolled state, it will inevitably rewind the target from whatever age they are to youth to infant to an egg cell and eventually nothing. Many quirks we see are complex versions of simpler quirks fused together by genetics. But from the earliest time of their emergence, quirks were both simple and powerful. Such is the third user of One for All, Bruce's Fa Jin. Inspired by Chinese martial arts, meaning to send or discharge power, the user can make repeated motions anywhere on their body to build up kinetic energy to release it explosively in a burst of speed and power, enough to mimic at least 55% of One for All's stockpiled power if used fully. At the number 9 spot on the list, and through the inheritance of One for All, Izuku is shown to apply Fa Jin in a more utilitarian way than the original user, merging the energy built up into other quirks, therefore reinforcing them, as seen when he used his Black Whip quirk with the stored kinetic energy to further coil the bindings to create his Black Chain ultimate move. We're not leaving the first century of quirks just yet though, because at number 8 is Gear Shift. Originally the ability of Kudo, the second user of One for All, he led a resistance against All for One with his ability to make things go faster. With a touch, he could control the speed and trajectory at which things move through space. Since he hadn't had One for All for long, he could only ever apply his quirk to small objects. All for One liking it to a pea shooter rather than anything more threatening. It wasn't until 100 years later that the quirk's true potential could be awakened. Thanks to the added power of One for All, Gear Shift evolved to affect targets on a cellular level, meaning it can not only work on larger targets, but on a deeper biological scale, as seen when Izuku Midoriya activated the quirk on his entire body, giving him super speed in the body and mind, most likely due to accelerating his brain cells to keep up with the increased speeds. Along with this, he can increase the speed at which his quirks activate and even shift about. A sharper summoning of Black Whip, a slower dissipating smokescreen, and obviously faster flight with the quirk Float, and increasing the rate at which kinetic energy is built up from Fa Jin. If you thought we were done with old quirks, think again, because it's a power that we see very often but is never truly named until it is joined with One for All. And that would be the power stockpiling quirk that All for One stole from another to give to Yoichi. This power can imbue someone with pure superhuman strength throughout their body and grows significantly stronger over time. Initially, the power of this quirk was insignificant enough that All for One was certain that his frail brother could use it and he would still have no problem if he were to rebel. Synonymous with its trait to grow stronger, when combined into One for All, the stockpiled power increases the scale and scope of any quirk that it happens to be attached to. Makes you wonder if any of the previous users of One for All had access to a somewhat amplified version of their quirks whenever they may have battled All for One. Out of the old generation and in with the new one. The user of this quirk strives to be the center of attention because at number 6, we have Neto Monema's quirk, Copy. By making contact with another individual, the user can replicate the target's quirk basically in its entirety. And for up to 10 minutes, originally 5 minutes, one can make use of the copied quirk. Not only that you can stock up to 3 additional quirks with the same time limit, giving the Phantom Thief the ability to switch between a variety of abilities and versatility, it is unlikely that the quirk allows the user to fuse quirks together, as we've seen Monema having to swap in between them to use. And what makes this power just shy of the top 5 is that the user must be in the presence of another quirk individual to make use of it. I know Monema would definitely break his back at being at the halfway point, but Copy is here at the 6th spot. Some of the crazier abilities in the series come with deeper emotional scars, because at number 5, Himika Toga's Transform quirk fits the bill. With the consumption of someone's blood, the user can transform themselves into a perfect image of said person, down to the smallest details, including their voice. The amount of time the transformation is proportionate to the amount of blood taken. If more than one person's blood is ingested, the user can switch between transformations without having to return to their original form. And with her awakening during the battle with the Meta Liberation Army, Toga's quirk displayed the trait to replicate the quirk of the person she happens to be impersonating. As long as she has sufficient knowledge of their ability, as it appears the use isn't instinctual like Copy, as Himika was able to use Ochako's skill release super move since she had witnessed it before. However, this power isn't as powerful as it should be. To use another's quirk with Transform, you must have a very strong emotional connection to the original person. As seen in the final war, Toga using twice his quirk double to create clones of Tomura and All for One couldn't use their quirks at all, which leaves this quirk the number 5 spot. At number 4 is the power that secretly overhauled the series, and that being Kai Chisai's Overhaul quirk. Easily one of, if not the most practically powerful quirk in the series, allowing the user to disassemble and reassemble matter on a molecular level. In organic targets, it can be used to warp the terrain and alter battlefields for better advantages. On organic targets, the power is seen used to momentarily kill people before reassembling and effectively bringing them back from the dead in either better or worser condition than before. Now, the true effect Overhaul has over quirks is the ability to biologically fuse people together into one entity, giving the person the power to access the quirk of those merged with them. This is also a sign of complex control thanks to Kai's genius intellect of the human body and his knowledge of the nature of quirks, potentially showing that without full comprehension of molecular structures, this quirk does nothing but break and put things back together. No, I said no more old powers, but I had to put this quirk somewhere in the top 3, and I hope you feel the same way, because at number 3 is the oldest quirk known in the series, and that is, of course, All for One. Due to gaining, or should I say, taking more nutrients than his younger brother, the boy only known as Shigaraki was born with the ability to steal and accumulate meta abilities to use for himself or even transfer them to another. This power gives the user immense versatility unlike any other power in the series, due to the potential variety of quirks that can be held. Unlike Copy, this power doesn't replicate, but completely strips a quirked person of their quirk factor, leaving them quirkless unless it is given back. All for One is seen having access to dozens, if not hundreds, of quirk over the course of his long life, being able to switch and use many different abilities simultaneously. While greatly powerful, All for One doesn't steal the original user's proficiency with the stolen quirk, which would cause the user to practice to gain a form of mastery. To circumvent this, All for One would only steal and use quirks that work primarily on simplicity and power. And in the event that he cannot handle certain quirks, such as those of newer generations, he would simply hold them temporarily before transferring it to someone that could be of use to him. Officially done with the old generation, and now let's talk about the quirk that not only questions the idea of what a quirk can be, but is so powerful it was a genuine threat to All for One as much as One for All. Because at number 2, this may be a surprise, is Kathleen Bates' New Order. After physically touching her target and calling out its name, Star and Stripe can place a rule onto her surroundings, allowing her to manipulate and impart a new property onto them. While she can only impose 2 rules at a time, as long as the user has a clear understanding and mental image of what they want to impart, almost any rule can be enforced. Targets include, but are not limited to, elements such as the air itself or people. As long as the target has some form of general identity, a rule can be placed on it. These rules can be ranged from simple descriptions such as Tomura Shigaraki is restrained in midair, to more complex rules that control cause and effect, like if Tomura Shigaraki moves at all, his heart will stop. These rules can even affect more intrinsic targets such as its own quirk factor, permanently changing its ability to rebel against other quirks when it was stolen by a fused All for One Tomura Shigaraki, which would eventually lead to its own self-destruction. This ability alone makes it practically impossible to fight against, especially if your own quirk can be turned against you. Though there is only so much this quirk can do, as it cannot increase, inhibit, or enforce its rules infinitely, such as making the user all-powerful or even invincible. Even taking its limitations into account, this quirk essentially borders the line of fantasy and near omnipotence if used accordingly. This ability is so powerful, All for One had to gamble Tomura's near complete body in order to fight and eventually steal this quirk, even though this risk would eventually lead to both the villain's eventual downfall. I thought quite a bit for the top spot of the quirk Manipulators. It had to be a power that could be used pretty much in any situation, no matter the case. Because if it wasn't going to be New Order, what was it going to be? But coming at the number 1 spot is Jin Bubagarawa's quirk Double. As long as one knows the exact measurements and even mannerisms, they can create an exact duplicate of anything they have witnessed, living or non-living. On the topic of living duplicates, when created, these clones made from memory of when Jin last interacted with their original, these entities have the same mannerisms and autonomy as the real thing, with the most unique trait of having the very same quirk as their template, essentially creating pre-existing quirks out of nothing. This alone allows one the potential to create an army, take over entire nations in less time it would take governments to do so. With enough knowledge and with the rate at which these clones can be created, one can form a vast army of quirk individuals similar to Toga's Sad Man's Legion, but with the duplicates being able to actually use the quirks of their original. This was the very reason why Hawk saw Twice as the most dangerous villain of the League, which led to his death, since he wasn't able to turn him to the side of the heroes. Well, that's everything for the list of quirks that can, in a way, manipulate other quirks. Let me know what your favorite is on this list. If you have any suggestions of a power that maybe should have made this list or an honorable mention, or even what would be your rankings and should they be any different from mine, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to speak to you about it and see you later.